Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast, where we celebrate filmmaking, storytelling and cinema across the island of Ireland. This episode was recorded live at the Capital Irish Film Festival, presented annually by Solas Nua in Washington, DC. Filmmakers do note that submissions are opening soon on Film Freeway. I had the opportunity when I was there to catch up once again with filmmaker Dennis Harvey, and this time in person to discuss his latest feature, Celtic Utopia. And this documentary explores a new Ireland and its vibrant music scene, while also examining a post-colonial society wrestling with its heritage. This will be screening on the 20th of June in the Oh Yeah Music Centre as part of this year's wonderful Docs Ireland programme, which runs in Belfast until the 21st. So if you would like to see the original video footage, just follow the link in the episode description. Thank you so much for chatting with us again. The last time was on Zoom.
Oh yeah, that was for Diff in 2024, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wow, yeah.
So it's been a busy time since then, but what I might do is go back to the very beginning and chat about your interests and stuff, because back then I will definitely link to that, but it's like we really only got to cover the film. So I was just wondering if you could just tell me about your journey into film. And I suppose with your work, it's very much so linked with your activism. So wondering if you could talk about that as well.
Yeah, I suppose I've been making films for over 10 years now. I suppose I started, I studied film studies in college, academic film studies, and then I finished in 2014 and moved to Madrid, and then just there I got a camera and just sort of started making stuff myself.
Yeah.
So that was like 2014, 15. So I suppose 11, 12 years I've been making films, and I've just sort of, I don't know, my way of doing it was always just to go and do it, and just try to learn and get better along the way. And my first feature, I Must Away, came out in 2023. Yeah. I spent like 8 years making that, so it was probably quite an unconventional process compared to. I didn't come through I didn't do like a short to like learn my craft and try to get known by funding agencies and stuff. I just sort of, I made shorts I like completely by myself and just put them out online, and then but didn't really think about it and sort of just like closed my eyes and hoped they were good. Yeah. But which I don't know, maybe that's not the best way, but the two shorts that I made and just put out online then became part of the feature that I made, became part of I Must Away. And then, I was sort of then in 2023 and 2024, I was doing research shoots for another feature about migration policy. But then out of that research, I released two short films. One, The Building and Burning of a Refugee Camp, which we spoke about before, and then subsequently a follow-up to that, the new policy regarding homeless asylum seekers, which came out at the start of 2025. And then, during all that time, I was making Celtic Utopia as well.
Wow. And in terms of then, like, how to be so uncouth, like what you're doing as your day job, what you're doing day to day on top of this, because it's intricate, it's a lot of research, but how does that fit in with your daily work?
Yeah, like thankfully since about 2020 I've been working like full-time full-time with film. I finished my master's in another academic master's in another academic like film studies course. Finished that in 2020, and then basically since then I've been working full time with my own films or with sort of other stuff like related to film. I've produced one short film for another person, and I'm still producing another film for someone. And I work doing subtitles for other people's films and stuff like that. But now mainly over the last few years especially, I've really just been able to focus on my own film practice, and I have been fairly productive as well. I suppose that's been good. I've made two features and two shorts since 2023. So that sort of high pace has helped with just things like fund, like getting artist funding, which I basically mainly live off. And then thankfully the films have been funded mainly. So like, you know, I get by through that and stuff. And I suppose a big thing about this, and it does make me quite sad, because I really did, like, I'm from Dublin, but I left in 2014, lived in Spain, and then I lived in Chile for a while, and since 2017 I've been in Stockholm. And when I was making Celtic Utopia, I did really, like, I basically sort of moved home and wanted to move home and sort of like return my practice to Ireland and stuff. But I just couldn't afford to live in Dublin and be like and you know, make like political documentaries or artistic documentaries. So unexpectedly, Stockholm is way more affordable. There's a more sort of robust funding system for artists and for film. So that space, yeah, I like it. It does really sadden me to say, but I think it's really important to note as well that, like, the reason I can do this full time, I think a large amount of it has to do with not living in Dublin.
It's such a shame, because I think we've lost a lot of creatives to that space. I think we've lost a lot of potential artists to picking careers that are, you know, they know they're going to be more lucrative down the line. It does speak to something a lot more systemic. But also in terms of, you know, living abroad, and does that give you that clearer vision? You know, like, you know, if you're of the world, you don't always see it if it's there every day, but, you know, you've seen the changes to your city, you've seen, you know, those slight cultural changes because you're away, and then you come back and, you know, things are a little bit different every single time. It's like boiling the frog.
Yeah, I hope I'm not boiling Ireland in some way.
Yeah,
but
no. I mean, we're being boiled culturally.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, no, definitely. Well, certainly with Celtic Utopia, it did give me a real, I think, something that made me sort of reapproach. Like, I've always, for a lot of my life, I've listened to Irish trad and folk music. Yeah. But definitely when I left, like, you know, you sort of find yourself listening a bit more to this stuff, maybe, or I certainly did, and then the longing for Ireland, and the desire to, I suppose it maybe being away made me think about Ireland more maybe than if I was just there living in it, and so, and yeah, the films that I was we were thinking about, me and my co-director Lars Levin, who's a Swedish man, like the films we were thinking about when we were starting to make Celtic Utopia were The Rocky Road to Dublin by Peter Lennon and Road to God Knows Where by Alan Gilsonan. Two films that sort of took the temperature of Ireland at a particular time. And like Rocky Road was, you know, Peter Lennon lived in Paris. He was the Guardian correspondent, lived in Paris. And then Alan Gilsonan was living in Dublin, but the film was funded by Channel 4 completely. And so these films did have a sort of outside perspective, where they weren't like funded by Ireland, and yeah, we really worked like for so many years so the film is primarily funded in Sweden, and then with some Irish Arts Council funding, but we really worked hard and worked for a long time to try to work with Irish funders, and in the end it was clear that it wasn't viable, that we wouldn't be allowed to make the film the way we knew it had to be made if we was going to be working with Irish funders, so which was also really sad. I thought like it should have been, I think it should have been, or we hoped it could have been a more of an Irish funded film, or a more significantly funded Irish film, but yeah, that's the way it was.
And, you know, tell me how the concept of the film started, like how the discussions were formed, and what is, like, how the creative workflow is between yourself and Lars.
Yeah, so it started, me and Lars were working at a production company in Stockholm, where Lars made his previous film Funko, which looked at like how young people were sort of like reinterpreting different folk musics in different post-colonial African countries, and then like that was, and sort of tying that to the post-colonial process in different African cities. And so yeah, we were sort of talking about that film, and I was talking about the music that was going on, the really interesting sort of weird folk music that was coming out of Ireland at the time that I was into, and that it was a really interesting political time. This was in like 2019, 2020. You know, when Sinn Féin got their biggest vote share in the South for ever in 2020, since 1919, since that the one time there was a unified vote in Ireland across the whole country. But the left got the highest vote share in modern times in 2020, and so and then a lot of the musicians that I was listening to and was sort of shown to Lars were sort of heavily involved in like end direct provision protests and Take Back the City, that the occupying of vacant buildings in Dublin in response to the housing crisis. And so there was this sort of like progressive, interesting political time that was sort of emerging along with this really interesting weird music. And
like one of the best quotes I've ever heard in my life, I think, was one of the comments, and it was like, folk music should be something that scares priests and politicians and not sell citrons. And it was like, I wrote that down. I was like, that is just brilliant.
The Hendy brothers from the Mary Wallopers, they're great. They're really good one-liners. So that was like, all that sort of stuff was very much in our minds, and it was really. So we took our first research shoot in 2021 and into the summer of 2021, and it was really like encouraging that so many of the musicians, we met like 10 musicians that trip and shot with loads of people, and everyone was really enthusiastic about the idea of like approaching Ireland from a post-colonial perspective and tying the interesting political time and the sort of trauma of the past with the music.
Yeah, and it does, you are on that journey. It is, the temperature has been taken, and it does feel very much of our generation as well, that it's, a lot of promises and not, like when we started off, it was the middle of the end of the tail end of that Celtic tiger, and the promises and this world, and really what has happened is, this sort of almost like a leaning back to conservative values in some ways, even though we are moving more left in some spaces. Like it's strange.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely been like a huge liberalisation in Irish society, which is great. Like and even the conservative parties that that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. I don't think they believed at all fundamentally in marriage equality or abortion rights, but they saw where the winds were blowing, and they were happy to get on board, and like then Fine Gael got credited with calling the in the marriage equality referendum and things like that. But
the abortion referendum, I thought it was like a Waterford Whispers prank when Fianna Fáil came around. You're like, what?
Yeah. I mean, so, but I think they were sort of pulled to the left by grassroots activism, and especially like youth-led, a lot of youth-led activism, which is amazing. But in terms of just, I don't know, economically, I mean, it's such a strange, I think, contradiction, like the Irish economy, that it's one of the only ones in Europe that's like we're running out of surplus. There's so much money flowing and sloshing around, but yet it's basically unaffordable for so many people to, or so many people have to live at home with their parents up until their 40s now and things like that, or just like really, really have to sort of struggle to find ways to get by, and that's, and I suppose that comes from like we've never had a left wing government in the history of the state. It's always been centre right with some like social democratic policies, but never. There's never been a serious left wing agenda, and I think that's what that leads to. Like,
and in terms of putting something like this together, and like getting it on the page, because I know it's not easy to get European money as well. Like like your idea is very strong, but there's a lot of hoops, and like even talk to me about that process of like what stage was it then when you're applying for these grants and supports, and like is it changing shape at all in this time period?
So we definitely have to give a lot of credit to Claire Strong, who was a Irish producer we worked with during the development of the film, and she and Aileen Eriksson, the lead producer in Sweden, they like worked very, very hard on that horrible EU media, Creative Europe media application, which is it's 82 pages. We didn't get it the first time, and then like we redid it the second time and got it. It was like 82 pages for 30 grand to develop a film, and we had to talk about like the separation of rubbish into recycling in our office and things like that. That's the level of like detail that you have to go through, which I think is insane, and it doesn't serve filmmakers, it doesn't serve producers. It's something, it's coming from a bureaucratic system that is just endlessly like adding layers and layers upon itself the EU, and then just sort of gets like slopped onto filmmakers. But of course it was great to get it.
It's not fun, but I suppose like you are competing against a lot of people, and I suppose it has to be very transparent and fair. Do you know, like, there's so many people vying for that pot, like in so many different countries, that it's like it just has to have all the boxes to eat. But it's like all applications are no crack, but that one is particularly long.
That was particularly bad, but it is great that it's there. Like, and we do need. I mean, like to make these sort of films, you need money wherever you can get it and things like that. So it is great, and we were so happy to get it. But
and I suppose as well, like, it's the marketing. They're supported by that. That's how I first heard about it. Like that's how it came into my inbox. I was like, what? That's amazing. I haven't seen that. And it's it's going out to all the countries. It's like it's part of a network as well.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, all that stuff is really good, and I mean it is really good for co-productions across countries and stuff. It can be hard. One thing I think about, say, the writing process when you're doing applications for films, it's like, I understand there needs to be a sort of paper trail and things like that, especially when it's like EU and when it's taxpayer money. Of course there should be like but it's been interesting for me. I must away with a project award from the Arts Council, and then Celtic Utopia we had a lot more people involved and a lot more different funding. But then the two shorts that I mentioned, like I just made them. They were sort of research for a film, and then the production company MDMC, who I work with in Stockholm, just like they just sort of fronted the money to pay for post production, and now we've sold them to TV and stuff. So it's a very risky game, but like we've got the money back. But it was so refreshing just not to have to actually write or talk about anything, that it was like pure responding to a situation, making a film and putting it out there, and then they did very, very, very well, like, and which it does make me think a little bit that, like, I would love to think if we could try to find another way of funding films, or of trying to like reduce the paperwork and stuff, because I think it's going to get to a stage soon, and I'm sure it's already happening, like where artists and filmmakers are so much under so much pressure and things like that people just be using ChatGPT and AI to write the applications. And I imagine the funders, because the paperwork just goes up and up and up, will be using AI to sort of do an initial cull and things like that, and then it'll just be like AI's reading each other's work, and what's the point of that?
Then like the artistry comes so far behind.
yeah, exactly. But I shouldn't be hounding on these things too much, but I understand why there should be a paper trail and things like this when it comes to funding.
Then in terms of going into production, so like it was a big application process, and even finding your musicians, did you have all of them lined up? Were there any that you kind of found as you went? And did any of those discussions or talks surprise you, or did you have it all kind of beat it out before?
No, not at all. And I think that's a thing that I think is really important in documentaries. I think, of course, you should write and you should plan, and and then you go and test, then you like shoot development material and stuff. But I think it should always be an open, or for me, I think the most interesting films come when like it's an open process, and that you can respond to what happens, both on shoot, but then also like what people say to you and where the participants lead you and things like that. So for us, there was a certain amount of musicians that we wanted to start with, but then like once some people it worked brilliantly with, some it didn't work amazingly with, but so we'd like stay with certain people and go deeper into their worlds, and then but also the musicians were like really, really helpful and generous about recommending someone else and being like, oh, you should, if you think this is interesting, talk to this person, they're doing amazing stuff. And so we discovered loads of people along the way, and then just by like serendipity met certain people like Nisha McCowell, the amazing Shan singer from Donegal, was like actually a friend of a friend, and we were going to a singing festival and we were just staying in the same house. And then he sang at the festival that night, and everyone was just completely blown away. And then I was just like, well, can you be in this film? And then he became one of the main characters.
Like a scout.
Yeah.
I can talk to my agent. Yeah.
So that was beautiful. And like the main thing for us, I think, that was really heartening was when we did the first shoot. Yeah. That people were sort of happy to get to talk about Irish music and their work, through this post-colonial lens, that it was something maybe that hadn't been brought up too often, and that was really encouraging and also reassuring for us, because if no one wanted to talk about it like that, we wouldn't know how to film. So
yeah, and I suppose that's always the risk. I suppose artists are probably a little bit more open as well, you know, like it is the desire to create and to be part of a discussion is very much so hand in hand with being an artist. In terms then of, you know, like editing it and okay, I'm gonna put the two questions together because I know we're running short on time, and I definitely won't keep you because this is such a special day of like celebration and meeting your mates. So the two questions are together is the edit process in something like this is really, really important. And, you know, were there ever any moments that was particularly stressful? And then that's the final question is watching it then with an audience and like different, because it is something that is so familiar to me when I'm watching it, that I know these people and I've grown up here. What's it like then watching it with, you know, people that maybe have a very different idea of what Ireland is?
Yeah, so to speak to the editing, like, I mean, yeah, it was a really long editing process. We worked with a brilliant editor, Dominika Daubenbuschel, who's a Swedish-based editor, who's really, really experienced, and with our process was that like we'd shoot and then we'd edit. Like Lars and I would edit material, and I really love editing it. I find it really enjoyable, and like it just gives me energy and things like that. So I really loved like editing scenes and stuff like that. And then we'd go and work with Dominika and sort of like put a bigger assembly together with the scenes that we had already, because there's so many topics, there's so many different people. We always knew we wanted it to be like a thematic documentary and not be, even though you do get to know the characters, we weren't going like deep into character arcs and things like that. So we knew that was the way we wanted to do it, but it was a very challenging way to edit the film, and we had like way too many topics at the start that we wanted to cover. We had something like 13, and then, you know, it's sort of down at sort of 3 or 4 core topics now.
What was the biggest darling that you had to kill during that process?
I think probably for me that with the Irish Travellers and their influence and the huge amount they did for Irish music.
It could nearly be its own whole documentary.
Yeah, for sure. And then also, and of course then like the insane maltreatment of travellers in general in Ireland, which like continues to this day, even though things have the recognition of travellers as an ethnic minority, I think was good. So that was a really big topic that just we really tried to film with Thomas McCarthy a good few times. I met him a few times and we chatted loads and he was up for it, but it just never worked out. So that was something that like I did feel that there is so Charles Hendy from the Mary Walpers sings Wexford by Pecker Dunn. Their version of it. Pecker Dunn's a brilliant travelling musician, so that's sort of the only nod we have. But there's loads we could have done with how travellers used to bring the music around Ireland and really like spread the music and maintain the tradition. Yeah. Like Thomas McCarthy's grandmother, I remember I went to a gig and he said, if I'm not mistaken, she couldn't read or write, but a musicologist transcribed 1,200 songs that she had from memory. So like it's sort of it's absolutely just incredible, the whole the depth of history and
that is a whole documentary.
Yeah.
Put that in. I would watch that.
Pat Collins did a really nice TV documentary on Thomas McCarthy a few years ago. So that's really worth watching. But yes, I know it was a very long editing process, challenging one. But I love that. For me, that's the beauty of making films, and there's so much. Like you can understand so much when you're doing editing, but there's also, I think there should be some magic in there and mystical things. So that was great. And then watching the film, I mean, with audiences and audiences who aren't as familiar with Ireland, I mean, it's been really beautiful. Like we premiered the film in Locarno last summer, and
it's brilliant.
Such a beautiful festival. But it was like a Monday morning at 11 a.m. the premiere in this big sort of school hall. Like Monday morning at 11 a.m. in Switzerland. I was a bit like thinking before, I was like, well, this is really good that we're in Locarno, but I imagine this will be sort of a bad premiere. But then it was full. It was like 900 people there. The sound is never heard as good sound in any cinema as that place. They'd made it so incredible. It looked brilliant. It was an incredible. It was such an amazing start, and like people were really engaged and stuff. So that was sort of so beautiful, and that has really set the tone. It has felt great. Audiences, like we were in Chicago then in October, and the audiences, it was packed both days, and the audiences were incredible. Like I did find it very impressive with like US audiences. The people have these like incredibly articulate, like 1 minute essays almost prepared and as questions. I found that was really, really great knowledge of the subject and things like that. And then we showed it in Cork at the Irish premiere, which was amazing. No, so it's been great. It actually the response from audiences has been brilliant, and I think it's important for me as well that we sort of expand the idea of what Ireland is, because Ireland has changed so much and is always changing, and folk culture is always changing and under negotiation, and sort of it's a process of negotiation always, and I think so that we have like Negro Impactor in the film who are like making neo soul sort of music, but that can also function as folk music, and same with like Young Spencer from the Shankill Road, like in Belfast, and from a loyalist background. He also speaks so interestingly about his Irish identity, his British identity, his Belfast identity, and like he's like a rapper, but still I think that can function as a folk music, as an Irish folk music. So to spread that sort of idea, especially in a time of like horrific exclusionary nationalism and things like that around the world, that I think it's nice to try to, or it's important to try to like take back an idea of what a nation is and expand that, or what like a national folk culture is, and expand that to people, and sort of try to not just dismiss the idea, like some sort of idea of an imagined community that actually we can imagine, because a nation sort of is this idea of an imagined community, but we can imagine it way better than than harking back to the past and things. We can push things forward.
And then finally, what is next on the slate? Like, what is next on the projects? Are you always sort of tinkering and moving with ideas, or like, I mean, it does seem as well like these are long periods of time that you're investing. Do you think really carefully before going into it? Or also, is this touring with the project and going everywhere with the project? And you had mentioned it might be going to some very exciting places. I don't know if we're allowed to say officially, but
no, we can. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I mean, touring with it definitely takes a lot of time. I'm going to Copenhagen Docks now in a couple of weeks, and then Paris at Cinéma du Réel, where they like organise like an hour-long discussion after the film with like an expert, and that sounds amazing. It's a beautiful like French intellectual tradition there, I think. And then the film will have a cinema release in Japan, in the Balkans, in Sweden, and then in Ireland in the summer. So it's amazing, and it's such a privilege to get to travel like this and go around the world with the film. And then it does obviously take a lot of like physical energy and take a lot of time. But I also, I don't know. I don't find it hard at all to have ideas and stuff. I'm always working on like 2 or 3 things. I'm just very used to working on loads of projects simultaneously, and they're usually pretty long processes. So I'm working on the feature that I made the 2 shorts out of, this about migration policy. I've been filming for that for about 3 years now, gathering material. So I'll be editing sort of more seriously now soon with that, and then I'm going to make the third in the trilogy of shorts about the policy of homelessness on arrival for asylum seekers that the Irish government has been operating since 2023.
That's really important. It's something that's so open-ended, and you're filming for so long. How do you know when there's a conclusion? Because it kind of feels like everything's so depressing. Like, how do you, find that upbeat moment where people aren't going to leave and go, oh God?
Yeah. I suppose the thing with documentaries is like you could just film forever. Like, and it's been a nice thing that people have said. I've seen on Letterboxd and people have said it after the screenings that they could have easily watched another like 3 hours of Celtic Utopia, which is a beautiful thing to hear. But I actually don't think they mean that. I think that's just I think they would have been, if we had gone on too long, they probably would have said, no, they should have been shorter. So I think when people say they want to see more, it's a good sign that you probably ended it at the right time. Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I suppose a lot of it, there should be some, I think I sort of mentioned it with the editing, there should be some sort of magic and mysticism, I think, in filmmaking, that not everything should always make sense. I think when things make too much sense, or like a film process makes too much sense, and it's like it's written over and over again and things like that, something is lost. So I think for me, it's you go on gut feeling, and you try your best. You put everything into the film, and then you put it out there, and that's it. Like for me, that's, you have to just be true to what you. When you're deep in a project and deep in an edit, I think what's best for that project.
Yeah. And
then you'll put it out, and you should just. That's it. That was. And then maybe if you might feel different. Like when I see I Must Away, which was like my first film and things like that. Of course, there's stuff I see in it now that I'm like, I'm not sure about that. But I never, like, I've spoken to filmmakers who like change their films like after releasing them, things like that, which I think is utter madness. Like, I mean, I just go crazy. Like for me, I'm just like, you have to trust that when it's time to end a project, put it out there. That's it. It's in the world. Move on. Like and
yeah.
And
you
I
can
think
always
that's
be
just,
tinkering. Like you can always,
And I think I think it is important as well, just to like that where it keeps me energized anyway, is to like you go really deep into the thing. The specific, so as I work with like the same broad themes of migration and sort of culture and politics and things like that.
Yeah.
But you go into your really deep subject, like go into a particular subject in that really deeply, and then you just have to. It has to end at some point, and there's for me there's nothing like the joy and the energy I get from like starting a new project before you've got into the difficult things. When everything seems possible and everything is is on the horizon, and you haven't really thought of like. I always get this real like sense of joy at the start of a project when I just think everything is going to be amazing, and then you realize that some ideas are bad or whatever, but the energy I get from the start of a project is great, and it's important.
And what is your favorite piece of feedback from an audience member, or maybe someone has written about it? What's the kind of thing that you'll carry about Celtic Utopia and you'll be like, I was delighted they said that or they got that?
I mean, it's been really beautiful that there's been so much like very positive feedback actually, which is really nice. It's not always like that. God, yeah, I'm sort of drawing a blank, but I suppose this thing that people like, that it seems to sort of give people some sort of hope or optimism that actually things can get better, because I think we're living in this time that like of such darkness. There's such like dystopian, and like the argument of so many politicians is to like is a sort of like of argument of misery, like politics of misery, so that people can feel like you can actually the things can actually get better, that like wars can end and something better can come after that. You'd see that, like I've seen that like written a bit on Letterboxd, and people also like older Irish people have said they feel real like joy about the generation that came after them, that people are a lot, like younger people are a lot freer and things like that. That means a lot as well.
Oh, that's lovely. Okay, well, thank you again so much, and have a lovely night, and thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you so much, Gemma. Cheers.
Thank you so much for listening, and be sure to like and subscribe to Film Ireland wherever you get your podcasts, and you can get tickets for this or check out the wonderful programme on docsireland.ie.